What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Yesterday, Nintendo announced the Shutdown for a certain Mario game that got a lot of reactions online since there's already a ton of discussion around the idea of game preservation with everything happening around physical media currently in Sony, but we'll go over all of that here today. Also, we are going to be talking about Sony as there are reactions coming in from analysts on if Sony will actually backtrack on all of this stuff, and a pretty significant shakeup continues to happen at Xbox, with one report pointing out something that makes sense, but is also quite frustrating when you look back at the big picture, but we'll go over all of that and more. Guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button, helps out a ton, and if you're new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. Guys, we're every weekday morning, 8 a.m. Eastern Time, going over the world of gaming news, trying to keep you up to date here on YouTube, as well as on Spotify. So if you haven't already, go check that out, comment, follow, all that good stuff there. And we're going to start today with Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. Now, this is a game that released on phones and then also found its way over to Steam on PC. And now it's shutting down. We can see this. Now, this is a message that was put out over on the website, where they say, "We regret to inform you that we'll be ending service for Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis on October 6th, 2026. We understand that this news may be disappointing, and we sincerely apologize for the abrupt nature of this announcement. Since the launch of the App Store and Google Play versions on September 7th, 2023, and the Steam version on December 6th, 2023, we have worked to provide the best possible experience for our players. After careful consideration, however, we have determined that it will be difficult to continue doing so and have made the decision to end service." So yeah, this thing lasted 3 years, and I look at something like this, right? Originally, okay, a phone game, but then did find its way to PC, and it starts to, the whole situation with phone games and console games or PC, it's been really blending together, merging together over the last decade or so, to where these are just live service games, and you see what happens over time when it's deemed, I would assume, not profitable enough for the amount of work and updates that it needs. They just kind of shut them down and the games then kind of disappear. So right now people are hoping that Square will do something with this and maybe turn it into its own game that they can release on all different platforms as an all offline version. But as of now, it's just shutting down and disappearing. Also, we may have some information now coming out showing that Nintendo is still working on VRR, variable refresh rate, for the Switch 2 in dock mode. This we can see was noticed by Nintendo Patents Watch over on their social media account, saying, "Saw this Nintendo technology development job post in my feed. While not an ironclad evidence, it's credible that VR output is still being worked on." This kind of pointing to a job listing on the Nintendo careers page with, it looks like, experience troubleshooting display protocol and VR issues between HDMI and DisplayPort specifically being pointed out. And we had already talked previously when the system was coming out, there was the frequently asked questions page, and it seemed like in the specifications, it was listed as VRR being a feature for docked mode, then it was removed, and we know now it's currently just used in handheld mode. And I think it is something that Nintendo is working on. They're just troubleshooting further to make sure everything works, and it does come down to different display types, and there is significant, we'll say, QA that has to happen here. I mean, even Sony had to add it later on for the PlayStation 5, so I would expect a similar thing here at some point for the Switch 2 with a firmware release that Nintendo, honestly, will just kind of push out randomly one night. Oh, and Palworld is scheduled to release in 1.0 tomorrow, and Nice update here. We can see a surprise. This over on their account where they say, "After much thought, we have decided not to raise the price of Palworld following the 1.0 release and will keep it at $29.99. They say it's a small way of saying thank you, keeping the price there, as they also had announced previously they have 40 million players. I mean, players is important to note, I guess, although the sales, I think, have been very, very good for this game, clearly. They also had it on like Game Pass and stuff, but I would say a significant portion of that player base has actually bought the game. And so now here's Pocket Pair. We already see they're doing other titles spinning off even just outside of this game, with Palworld becoming a larger franchise. So 1.0 out tomorrow. I haven't checked in on this game in quite a while, so let me know down in the comments if you're excited for the 1.0 release and what big upgrades, I guess, you're looking forward to tomorrow. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo shutting down a certain Mario title that sparked a lot of reactions online. That was actually right alongside of Final Fantasy VII Ever Crisis. So just about everything I'm saying here for Mario Kart Tour also applies to Ever Crisis, because these are two games that are indeed, I guess, just disappearing here in a few months. So we can see this is over on their social media account for Mario Kart Tour, saying service for the Mario Kart Tour game ends on September 29th, 11 p.m. Pacific time. All right. Thank you for your support throughout the years. For info on how Rubies and the Mario Kart Tour Gold Pass will be handled moving forward, see in-game notifications or the frequently asked questions below. I did jump over there because I was curious about this Gold Pass thing that they had, because sometimes these games, when they get to end of service, they'll just open it up and just make it free for the last couple of months. And it looks like that's indeed what they are doing here. So from, it looks like August 4th and onward to the end of September, when the whole thing shuts down, they're just going to open it up for the benefits to just be free. So you could just, I guess, take advantage of all of that towards the end. Although you then will run into the point where the game just goes away and it disappears. And that is one of the big things. If you look at a lot of the replies, like frustration around, hey, I spent a lot of time on this game. I mean, while I did try it out when it first released, I mean, I fell out of it. It's a phone game to me. I was like playing it. It's kind of cool. Mario Kart in sort of an interesting fashion, where it was, you use basically one hand to play the game, right, for a phone. And it was in like the portrait format. Again, kind of cool. And it was like, all right, that's cool, Mario Kart. Then it kind of just move on from there. But it seems like there were many people who did stick with it, or were at least in and out with different updates, as there were even like full-on tracks that were specific to this version, this Mario Kart version. So with that in mind, probably a lot of money also getting dumped into this. And this is something that comes up around these gacha games, like gacha games on phones, or just phone games in general, that are indeed live service titles attached to mobile devices. And that's that sometimes, yeah, most times even, you get to a point where it hits end of service and it just goes away. There's no offline version of the game, which is still really weird to me, because some people, whales especially, will legitimately dump tens of thousands of dollars into certain gacha games, and there might come a point in time where all that money invested is literally worthless. It's just, the whole thing just goes away. And I think it's very strange that there isn't more of a push on some of these companies to just have like requirement, hey, there has to be something. And it could even just be, here's a trophy case with all the cool stuff you've unlocked, your characters in the game, maybe some of your high scores, or something you open when you do, say, press the app on your home screen. So right now, while we have seen Nintendo with what Animal Crossing was one for mobile devices, where they had an offline version that they sold for a little while there, people are asking if there could be something like that for Mario Kart Tour, but at least for now, does not seem to be the case. And I know the game preservation thing is thrown around. I think this comes down to just in general consumer rights around, hey, this is a game that I have spent hundreds, thousands of dollars on, and then it can just go away literally just like that. Just something else to think about as we go towards this all-digital future that is being pushed along now by a large platform holder like Sony. Just keep an eye on some of these mobile games, even if you're not playing them, and just notice how many of them maybe get to end of life and they're just delisted or completely removed despite a significant amount of money being pushed in by the audience for it. Next up, let's talk about Sony here with the all-digital future. Again, January 2028, they will cease production of physical media. Right now, PlayStation 5 discs, which then leads us to believe the PlayStation 6 is just an all-digital system. Well, with everything happening online, I mean, it's kind of ridiculous out there right now for Sony. It's crazy whenever they put out any kind of message, say on Twitter, advertising another game. The replies are just disastrous for them. So you do wonder about some of these third parties that are advertising through Sony right now with their social media accounts, if it's a great strategy, right, or a great idea, I'll say, for these third-party games, because they're not getting any kind of response for their game. It's all about Sony and their current strategy around pushing towards just a digital ecosystem going forward. All right, well, with all this happening, analysts are being asked about Sony's strategy and if they will backtrack on this, or if they really are full speed ahead and them just ignoring everything is legitimately their strategy now going forward. And we can see now, this is over on IGN, and they had talked to Dr. Serkan Toto, who's a part of like an analyst firm there in Japan, where he says around 50 million people subscribe to PlayStation Plus. This in reference to, we had talked about how people were posting that they were canceling a lot of their PlayStation Plus memberships and showing this off. Okay, he says, as a thought experiment, let's say 500,000 cancel and protest. That would be just 1% of that business gone. Of course, not enough for Sony to start rethinking. Digital is just too lucrative. So right now with digital games, remember, it's a 30% cut that goes to Sony from third parties. We'll say it from their perspective. But then there's also packaging. You have to create the disc, of course, get it pressed. You then have to send it out. So there's shipping. There's a lot that happens to where third parties will end up with like less than 50% at times of the overall revenue generated from that $70 sale, okay? But for Sony, it's everything. You know, like let's say they sell a game, they don't have to deal with anything when it comes to production or shipping for a disc. They literally get 100%. Or for third parties, they just get the full 30% outright, and the third party's happier to sell through them. Okay, so their current profit margin has been too weak for years now, so they feel like they must act. From an economic perspective, digital sales just make too much sense, especially for platform holders. Now, Daniel Ahmad also discussed this on his social media account, where he says, I do think Sony will respond in some capacity given the backlash, and to be honest, they shouldn't have announced this until they were ready to disclose how discs would work on PS6, but I'd be surprised if they do a full reversal at this point. So I do think Sony will respond in some fashion. I don't think, though, that they are all of a sudden going to upend plans for the PS6 being a digital system, even though the backlash has been overwhelming online. I think they'll have a disc-based drive. Like they'll have something you attach to your PS6, most likely through a cable, so it's not going to at least be form-fitting like the PS5 disc drive is. But I think it'd be crazy if they said, hey, even if you have a large wall of physical media for your PS5, like you can't play it on the PS6, that would actually give people some pause and make them think about, oh, I'm actually not entrenched that much in the PlayStation ecosystem any longer. Maybe I will look around at alternatives. And even though people go, where are they going to look? There are other systems out there. Maybe you do want to go to Helix. Maybe you do want to go to PC. Maybe you look at the Switch 2 and go, hey, that still gets cartridges. Maybe I'll go there. And even third parties are starting to look more and more at the Switch 2 now. Maybe that will be the move. So even though Sony is in kind of that, a lot of people, kind of arrogant phase, there are other places for people to play games. Or get this, they just stick with their PS5 for a long time. I mean, really, Sony is the one who has to try to sell people the PS6. The customers out there don't necessarily have to buy the $1,000 PS6 for quite a while, since I also think cross-gen will be quite lengthy this time. I'm thinking it might be the length of like an entire console generation, maybe 5 or 6 years, we'll say. So Sony trying to sell this system, really getting people to move over to it, that's going to be much more difficult this time. But there was something else that was going around that the optics and the timing are just really bad here, which we can see over on Insider Gaming. They say, according to the SEC filing, Totoki, this is Hiroki Totoki, okay, over there at Sony, sold 225,000 shares of Sony stock on July 3rd at $21.02 per share. Totoki pulled in roughly $4.7 million on the transaction. The 225,000 shares represented 56% of his total stake in the company. And so if you look at Sony stock right now, after the announcement, the stock was climbing, and again, the optics are really bad here, because it's like, we're going to announce something that is favorable to investors, and then I'm gonna sell my stock. The timing just it does line up a little too well for this, but nonetheless, here again, this situation in the short term, I don't think is going to hurt Sony that much outside of the PR hit that they're taking and the overwhelming response online right now. The pushback, it is deafening. But Sony, if you see, they're rewarded on the stock market. They've already sold 90 some odd million PlayStation 5 systems, so I don't think they're going to have a hard time selling just software. GTA 6 is going to do really well this holiday. It'll be next year when they start talking about the PlayStation 6 that all of a sudden they could look around and go, oh, this is going to be a lot harder to sell this system right now because we don't have the buildup of goodwill that maybe we had going into, say, the PlayStation 5, or even before that, the PS3, which got a lot stronger throughout the generation, and then all the crazy stuff they did with that PS4 launch, including taking a jab at Xbox, who was already on their back foot over physical media. I mean, it just worked out great for that launch, and as we saw with the PS5, worked out pretty well there too. Not necessarily the case, completely different going into the PlayStation 6, but I think that's when they'll really feel kind of the consequences from what's happening now. Next up, let's talk about Microsoft as their 100-day reset continues, which has resulted in significant layoffs, thousands of people being laid off, restructuring happening, and it seems like also some shifting of focus when it comes to game projects that we're hearing about. So let's take a look. This over on Bloomberg from Jason Schreier, saying Obsidian Entertainment, a subsidiary of Microsoft's Xbox, has canceled multiple projects and will begin working on a new game in the popular Fallout franchise as part of the division's broader restructuring, according to people familiar with the matter. As part of the shakeup, Obsidian has canceled a planned sequel of the 2025 role-playing game Avowed, along with other unannounced projects. The video game studio, based in Irvine, California, also laid off around a quarter of its workforce. I assume this would go along with them canceling multiple different projects that I guess people may have not been needed there at that time, and it seems like they're consolidating or at least focusing down on this Fallout game. Okay, say under the new plan, studio design director Josh Sawyer will lead a new title in the Fallout universe, a series of role-playing games that take place in an alternate history in which the US has been ravaged by nuclear war. The emerging strategy is still in flux, people said, and could still change. Okay, so I read this, and I was a little confused, because it seems like a Fallout title is on the table, but Obsidian says, no, we want to make a sequel to Avowed, and then these other unannounced projects that we didn't hear about. So I'm looking back at Phil Spencer and the Sarah Bond era. This kind of feels like they were really just letting these studios do whatever. And that's fine when it comes to just the overall creative vision from them. But also you do at times set them up to fail. Like you do have to be a boss sometimes and go, look, you know what? Hey, what a great idea. Sequel to Avowed. Awesome. How about we think about it after we make a Fallout game, like the obvious thing to do, right? It's let's get Obsidian. They'll work with Bethesda. We'll do a whole thing, new Fallout game. That is setting them up for success. All right. Now, maybe they don't all want to do a Fallout game, but then they'll also, you assume, have jobs after a couple of years. Whereas now we're hearing about all these layoffs because you have Avowed come out and I kind of feel like probably underperformed, we'll say. Does a sequel make sense? No. So it's a little strange to me that it takes Asha Sharma coming in and doing the obvious thing that should have been done before. But I've also kind of mentioned at times, you know, sometimes it's not a bad idea to shake things up with someone who is not just like a gamer at heart necessarily. Like she's even said she's trying to learn this industry now being in this position. And she's looking at it purely from what makes sense, what will bring in money, what will bring in interest. And yeah, I would say consolidating down to some significant pillar releases like Fallout does make the most sense. But now with that, here's something that I don't think makes sense. And like we can see, now this is over on the game developer. It says a warrant notice filed in Texas has confirmed that Xbox subsidiary ZeniMax Media has laid off 158 people in the US state. The document sent to game developer upon request by the Texas Workforce Commission states that 96 of those redundancies are being made at the office of the id Software in Richardson, Texas. 40 remote workers reporting into that location have also been let go, indicating 136 roles have been eliminated in total. This is crazy to me because like it seems like the studio you'd want to keep around if nothing else for their technological prowess. id Tech, like the engine, is quite impressive. And I think now what we're seeing is it is mostly being pushed into like a support studio role. And it probably will just be for that as you're not going to make a lot of big games like Doom with 40 people. That seems to be about what they're down to now, maybe less. And I guess they're just kind of hanging out, making sure that engines are working. Or if that's the case, maybe they won't even use id Tech then, and that's just going to be shelved. So that's a strange one to me. Seems like that would be a core studio you'd want to really protect, if nothing else, because of their knowledge around, you know, just making games work and their intimate knowledge of id Tech that I think should be used more often within Microsoft there, especially going forward, their own like in-house engine. But I guess those are just the cuts they deem necessary here during this reset. So one decision that makes sense to me, you know, have Obsidian look at a new Fallout game, almost all hands on deck, that thing. But on the flip side, something that to me makes no sense, slashing id down to where they're basically a background support studio. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about a late port that has been announced now for the Switch 2, and I'm curious how this one is going to work, which we can see over on Gematsu. It's for the Crew Motorfest. So it came out a couple years ago now on other platforms, but it's coming to the Switch 2 on October 8th. This is from Ubisoft, and they've already shown the physical edition. It's a game key card, so there you go. It's just kind of the way it is with the game like this. But it coming out October 8th. It's up for sale on different retailers like, say, Best Buy. It's coming in at $50. This game's been on sale multiple times for PlayStation or Xbox. Now you've been able to get it for $20 pretty easily. I did look over on the PlayStation Store, and here we go again when it comes to the digital store versus physical media. I think it was still full price. It was like 60 or 70 bucks on the PlayStation Store. It was also added in the PlayStation Plus, so I guess there's that as like a consolation prize. But again, here we are though with it switched to $50. The reason this is kind of interesting to me is because these sorts of racing games tend to rely on analog triggers. So I'm interested to see how they overcome that with the Switch 2. Maybe they go ahead and map it to the right joystick. Maybe you can use the GameCube controller, or they just say, you know what, it's digital. You press the button down, say your shoulder button, and it's just full throttle the whole way. So that's the one thing I'm curious about. The game itself was fun, kind of flew under the radar a bit there when it came out, but it's like an open world racing game that kind of leans a little bit into the Forza Horizon setup, but to me is even more arcadey than that. So I think definitely worth checking out on the Switch 2. Again, reviews depending, performance, technology side depending, because there really aren't a lot of games like that currently on the system. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, did you play Mario Kart Tour? Okay, 2% say they're still playing it frequently. 39% say yes, but only a couple times or fell out of it. 59% didn't play Mario Kart Tour at all. I was in that 39%. Like, yeah, I played it a couple times. It was interesting to try out on the phone, and then I kind of moved on. Some of the comments say they just completely forgot about it. And this is the thing, while we're talking about the digital ecosystem right now going into the PlayStation 6 and Sony's push right now for it, keep an eye out on some of these mobile phone games, all right? I'm telling you, this happens quite frequently, and occasionally it crosses over with the gaming world, or like for consoles or PC or anything, with some of these larger IPs like a Mario or like a Final Fantasy, and people go, oh wow, some of these mobile games people dump a lot of money into, they just disappear, and they'll tell you about it a few months before, and it's like, yeah, that happens quite frequently, so pay attention to that one again going into the digital future. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Oni, who says, I'm surprised no Beautiful Joe remaster, aka collection. Yeah, you know, Capcom, I feel like there's gotta be some talk about that, right? You see them going back into their catalog of titles that maybe they haven't really checked out much, or like Onimusha coming back like this, and they have been doing a lot of remasters and stuff. The reason I would be excited if a Beautiful Joe collection just showed up randomly, say in a Capcom Spotlight or at one of these big like events, Summer Game Fest or whatever, right? The reason I'd be excited is because that probably means Capcom is looking into the franchise again and a new game is being developed, and that would be awesome. But right now, we have Kamiya's, his, of course, new studio. They, I assume, would be the ones maybe that work on it. So they're working on the new Akami games. Maybe after that, keep an eye out. Beautiful Joe appears in some sort of collection. Might be worth getting excited to see if Capcom has plans for a new entry. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed yesterday's Newswave, I'll leave it up here in a card. Or maybe you want to hear more about Sony and their push to all digital for next generation. Seems like in 2028. Ryan and I did an entire Click R3 episode on this, and I'll leave it right below. Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.